Welcome everybody. Today we are going to check out the Gold Coast Railroad Museum, which is in South Miami. It is right next to Zoo Miami. And we are here in particular for one very historic train car that was used by several presidents of the United States in the past. It was retired. It is a National Historic Landmark, and it is here today on display in the museum, and we're gonna go check it out, as well as other historic trains throughout history, and we're gonna learn all about them at the museum. Museum guests will enter through the gift shop where there's various displays on military history. And that's because this museum was actually built on the former Naval Air Station Richmond, also known as the second largest World War II airship base in the United States. You can see signs of the past when we get to the section with all the outdoor trains. Admission to the museum is inexpensive at $12, and if you want to tour the Ferdinand Magellan presidential car, it's an additional $10. All right, we just paid admission and we are now inside of the big depot where all of the trains are lined up. You can see one right here on track 1. We've got track 2 here. They've got it decked out, spooky season. Halloween is coming up. Then we have track 3 with the very historic Ferdinand Magellan presidential train car that is fully armored. We're gonna check that out later. And then track 4, we've got a couple of tables here. Looks like they're doing some work there, setting up more Halloween stuff. There's a lot of train cars. You guys can see it goes all the way, even outside. And we will come back to this. We do have a tour booked for the Ferdinand Magellan, so we will be going inside. I am so excited. But first, let's check out some of the other trains. Right across from the Ferdinand Magellan presidential train is the California Zephyr Silver Crescent. And it has a little observation dome at the top, so we can tell this was a passenger train. Here we have one of the US Army hospital cars used in World War II and in the Korean War. So this was built in 1945. For use to transport soldiers that were ill, and they've actually got access to it in here. Let me turn on my flashlight so you guys can see, because it's pretty dark in here. So at the time in the 40s, this would be used by nurses, doctors, and soldiers would be transported here to medical facilities or even done treatment inside of this rail car. It is very hot in here, and they do have some fans here to cool off guests walking through. But I can imagine at the time, in the 40s, this would not have any kind of air conditioning inside. And I feel like it was, or at least not as effective as it is today in normal rail cars. If we walk towards the rear of the car, we have another bathroom in here. We have a cushioned toilet down there, 2 sinks, of course the mirror. We have a sterilizer room. Don't know if we can open this. So this is what is labeled as a sterilizer room. And this looks like where the soldiers would come, right? What? The soldiers, I feel like they would come in here to be examined and evaluated. It looks like it. Looks like they've got a lot of stuff here to carry all their medical equipment and medication. And then the other room we were just in would be for them to rest. So this car, I'm reading, would carry 1 doctor, 2 nurses, 4 service personnel, and can carry up to 33 patients. And it'll be used to move the military patients between medical facilities. And the area towards the back we were just looking at is actually a kitchen facility. And that will allow the onboard nurse and assistant to care for their patients. And we do see them in this picture right here, kind of having a beverage of some sort. So they were able to prepare stuff for the soldiers as they were being transported to a medical facility. So they're not just receiving care here, but they're also being comforted with food and beverages. Here's one of the bunks that they had at the time for the soldiers to rest while they were receiving care or going to get care eventually. And then what one of the nurses would look like. They still use these today. This is obviously how you would transport the luggage. It does have the Amtrak branding down there. I've seen something similar to this when we did our Amtrak video. The museum is about historic trains and artifacts, so don't expect the exhibits to look modern and sophisticated. However, I do think it could be taken care of a little bit better, and you'll probably notice that throughout this video. Still, there's no shortage of old photographs and information on most of the trains you're either looking at or walking through. This was built in 1925 and was used across the Florida East Coast Railway, which was constructed by Henry Flagler. And this one actually made the trip down to the Overseas Railroad to Key West. It was in service for over 40 years. Across the entire FEC line cutting through the state of Florida. And while the service was open to Key West, it did partake in some of those travels. You guys can see there's some seating up here, which is really cool, very high up. You guys can see I'm at ground level now. So you would have to go up these ladders and kind of go all the way up there. I don't know if I can do that right now. And then this would be the restroom. One can infer by the toilet there and sink. And it is not really that big. If we walk back down here, we have these high seatings up here, which has room for 4 people. Here,
kitchen/dining.
Guessing kitchen as well, yeah. And then we have something of for you to lay down. So through the years, this caboose had been deteriorating. And it wasn't until 1992, during Hurricane Andrew, that the actual train car I'm standing in was blown over and money had dried up. They just could not maintain it, so it was just given away. I believe here it says it was first given to the Florida Pioneer Museum in Florida City, which is not too far south from here. And then eventually, you know, with money drying up and money being an issue, condition deteriorating, and then Hurricane Andrew eventually blowing it over, it was donated here to the Gold Coast Railroad Museum. So I'm very happy that they include all of this information, so while I'm walking through, I'm able to kind of know where I'm at and the history of this, as opposed to just seeing one big red train. It does look nice. I love the paint on it. And you can see where the high seating is, right there. So I'm assuming you had the best view in the house if you were in there. All right, we saw what we could before the tour. Now we're back to the presidential car, the Ferdinand Magellan. Let's go learn about it. So really quick, before we start the tour inside, I want to point out that not all of this train car is completely armored and bulletproof. The bottom part is, and it adds a lot to the weight along with the bulletproof windows. But towards the rear back there, I guess towards the front, this would be the rear. Towards the front, that is not armored at all, and we're going to see the difference in a bit. So one thing about this car, it was used by various presidents. FDR, Truman, Ronald Reagan used it briefly at one point to give out a speech. So the interesting thing about this car here, the presidential car, it's not just a thing of the past that is not at a museum. It is still under federal contract. So if at any point President Joe Biden wants to take an armored train somewhere, he would come up, or someone on his behalf, the federal government will come up to the museum and not even ask, sort of demand that this car be put back into service because it is armored for the most of the train cars. So it would be very safe for the president to sit inside. And there's a couple of escape hatches, which you're going to see inside. Should this ever derail on its side, you can get out through the top, which would now be on its side, or you could get out through the side if for whatever reason you need to. One thing to note about that is not a bullet hole on the window. This is a bulletproof window, and it's very thick. In fact, this is damage on the exterior, or on the film I should say, from Hurricane Andrew. So when that hurricane came through in the 90s, this entire thing actually collapsed and a lot of debris was flying around. So a couple of windows on this train have that damage. And other trains had their windows completely blown out because they're not armored, they're not bulletproof. But this one, in fact, still has some remnants there. I guess a memory of the hurricane that devastated South Florida. So if you guys see, there is the green walls there. And then you go on this side, it's kind of a pink color. So this part is not armored. The armor point kind of starts towards here where that door is. So if you guys see right here, you'll see how thin it is. Right there, we're not in the armored section yet. But once we cross over here, move it a little more. Once we cross over here, it gets thicker. And that's how you know you are in the armored section. So right here, it is thick. And then it gets thin. And that marks the start of the armored part of the train, which is where the president would mostly be in, or actually he would be required to be in, because you do not want to get caught if anything happens in the section that is not completely armored. So if you guys see the exterior of it, it is what's called Pullman green color. And as opposed to like US Air Force One, which is like a light blue and white color, very distinct. You can tell that is the president's plane. This was kept Pullman green as opposed to something like red, white, and blue. Very obvious, because when it was not in use, when the president wasn't on board, it was stored in a yard with other trains, other Pullman trains. That way it would be hidden in plain sight. So you would not know this was the president's train. It would just be blending in with all the other trains. So that's why they kept it this color. But now, today, you know what it is. If you know any history of it, you know this was the president's train. But back at the time, You can pretty much hide this in a yard with other trains that look alike.
All right, so if you guys could squeeze into the kitchen for me real quick.
Yes.
So much cooler.
Oh, it feels better.
This isn't even the cold part of the car. Quick thing over here. So as I mentioned, we're connected to about 2,000 pounds of ice in total. So this is the air vent where all of that cold air would have flown up through. All throughout the car, there are fans to help circulate that cold air, make sure that the whole rail car is kept cold. Because at the time, your way of air conditioning was effectively your car is a giant refrigerator. All the cold air came up through here. And also because we're connected to, again, 2,000 pounds of ice, we've got two refrigerators right here. So you can see how those are sized right there. This galley is very cramped. One interesting thing about this is the White House staff actually took a look at this galley. They saw how small it was, and they decided they didn't want anything to do with it. So, instead of having the White House staff prepare the president's meals and take care of the president, it was handled by the Pullman porters. Here are your tools to stoke the fire. Cooktop, griddle, that's your toaster right there, and most interestingly, this giant tank right here, that is your piping hot coffee. So,
No way.
we have a jump seat. So this jump seat is where your Secret Service agent would have been stationed.
Alright, we're going inside the armor section. Nice.
Alright, so this is the dining space. Now right off the bat, unfortunately, all of the original china over here was stolen, so we don't still have the original out for display. However, thankfully we did have a private collector donate some of the original china, consult the missus before making any of the changes that he made, and there were some changes made in questionable tastes. Correct. So you want to take a guess how many windows that is right there?
Like 10.
That is one window. So
No way.
that is one window. So every window beyond that door we entered, 3 inches thick, 7-ply laminated glass right there, 200 pounds. Absolutely nothing is getting through any of these windows. Basically, at the time, the most effective way of getting bulletproofing was to just throw as much glass as... Throw as much...
Wow.
So, the guest rooms have a daytime configuration as well as a nighttime configuration. So, at night, they would have looked like this. You have your 2 bunk beds. Every stateroom was fitted with its own sink and mirror because they all shared one bathroom, and you don't want people going into the bathroom just to do their hair or something like that when you're all sharing a bathroom. This is FDR's room. As I mentioned, he had a wheelchair custom built specifically for this rail car right here. That is the original wheelchair right there. Now also, as I mentioned, FDR didn't like how small the rooms were, so he had them expanded. Biggest reason for that is if you take a look at his bed, it is permanently fixed into place. It extends the entire length of the bedroom. So, FDR didn't want to have to sleep in the convertible style beds. He wanted a conventional mattress put into place. So because of that, his room only has a nighttime configuration. Same for Eleanor's room. They both have a bed that's about 6 feet long. Now, to my understanding, the reason that is because, again, very independent man, he wasn't able to get into the bathroom by himself because there's a little bit of a change in elevation on the floor right here. So, how do you solve that problem? You get a bathroom in your own room. Where the window should be, there is a large steel plate. That is one of 2 escape hatches on this rail car. So in the event of an emergency, that can be pushed out from the wall. Everyone can escape through there. Other than that, FDR had handrails put into place over in the shower so he could hold himself up while taking a shower. Again, no assistance necessary. It's a very bog standard room. Biggest difference is the dresser. If you take a look over there, she had a much larger dresser put into place than any of the other rooms had. Eleanor was a very fashionable woman. She wanted to make sure she could carry as much of her wardrobe as possible with her, so she had that put into place so she could still be stylish on the go. Stateroom A is identical to Stateroom D. As I mentioned, they have a daytime configuration as well as a nighttime configuration. So this is how your guest rooms would have looked during the day. So your bed folds out from the headrest of the 2 seats you see down there, and the other bed folds down from the upper berth. That table actually folds out from the wall as well. So everything in here was built for space efficiency. So this is a nice place for your influential guests other than the President and the First Lady to spend their time, hang out, get away from the President. So this furniture here was all put in by Ronald Reagan. There's a little bit of debate on what the original furniture actually was. Some people think it was the same furniture that's in the dining room. Other people think it was similar to this, but different colors, maybe a little more comfortable. It's kind of hard to find photographic evidence of what exactly was in here before Reagan. I tried to tie the colors together. It still doesn't really work.
Really?
If you know anything about Nancy, I'm sure you know how she felt about this room. She hated it. So, furniture aside, this is a super nice room. Everything on the walls here, this is real white stained leather. So all of the material on the wall was real white stained leather. Again, being for the president, everything as nice as possible. Other than that, if we take a step over this way, we've got arguably the two most interesting things in this room. So first of all, if we step over here and we take a look straight up, that is the second escape hatch on this rail car. That is sourced directly from a submarine right there. Now, because this rail car was armored, all the bulletproofing, it is top heavy. Most rail cars are built bottom heavy so that in the event of a derailment, they stay upright. But because of all the armoring, this rail car was built top heavy. The bank vault door right here. This door alone weighs 1,500 pounds right here. Absolutely nothing is getting through this door right here.
Wow.
These hinges are crazy, man.
Insane. How thick that is.
Yeah. So nothing's getting through that door right there. I need to stop knocking on stuff.
That's so crazy. Look at my hand.
This is where the president would give his speeches, and also where most notably President Truman held up a newspaper with an incorrect headline that read, "Dewey defeats Truman." Of course, that is not how things played out, and Truman certainly had some fun with it. All right, we're looking at the first locomotive we saw coming into the museum. This is Steam Locomotive 153. It was built in 1922 and was in service along the Florida East Coast Railway from 1922 through 1938. It actually pulled President Coolidge's train to Miami in 1928 and was frequently used along the connection between Miami and Key West. We're not completely done with everything in here, but we are outside. So I want to note that there's a lot of trains outside. This one in particular, you guys can see it says NASA on the side. It was once used to transport spacecraft components and chemical fuels at Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral. And now it is here at this museum. And over here, which I'm really surprised they have, is a very old Metro Mover train car. I mean, these are autonomous now in downtown Miami. If you go there, they look much more modern. But this is one of the OGs. Those of you from South Florida know what I'm talking about. The windows were much bigger on them. I mean, look, they're massive compared to what you see today on the Metro Mover. So these look like old remnants of what once was the Naval Air Station Richmond, and you can see the lettering right there above this door, as well as other components that look like they're missing the rest of the structure. So we are all the way towards the rear as far as you can go. They do have model trains in there, but if you just look out, there's overgrown grass going over these tracks, very old trains. Not all of them have significance. It's like you're walking through an old rail yard, and you technically are. It is a museum, but it's also a rail yard, as you guys can see. We can't really go that far, but there are more trains down there. So if you're into model trains, make sure you get to the back of the Gold Coast Railroad Museum, because you're going to be in another world, really. Look at this. It is an entire city with various buildings, train stations. There's even wildlife and people waiting at the train station right there. I mean, look at this, the attention to detail here. There's a little village right here with a police car there. Various shops. Looks like a school bus. A fuel station right here. If we turn around, you can see there's no shortage of these miniature towns. I mean, this one has what looks like a church. Got a post office right there, and they're not actively moving, and you're told you cannot touch it, obviously, but they're just really nice to look at. I mean, you can spend a long time just looking at every bit of detail here. We have here Florida East Coast Passenger Coach 136. It was built in 1925, and it did regular travel, passenger travel, between Jacksonville and Key West along Flagler's Florida East Coast Railway. It most notably assisted in the evacuation of the Keys ahead of the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. If you guys do remember, that hurricane wiped out the overseas railroad to Key West, and it's the reason why we don't have it in existence today. This Coach 136 train car retired in 1958, and if we kind of just put my hand up, you can see there's seating inside. So this is what it would have looked back in the day, coming to take your seat to get on a train ride, say from Jacksonville to Key West. And I'm kind of just gonna walk along the outside because this one is not open, so you guys can see more or less the layout inside. It's got these, what look like greenish seats. There's two here facing in this direction, and then on the opposite side there's two more facing the other direction. And that's pretty much the layout. Two facing forward, or actually this one right here, I believe it has them facing each other. So there's different options. If you're traveling with four people, you want to sit across from each other, you can do that. It is so cool because I read so much about the overseas railroad and what it took to construct the line all the way down to Key West. A lot of people died in that process. A hurricane even came through there in construction and it reset them, and people died in that hurricane. And then come 1935, the Labor Day hurricane, this wasn't used to kind of save people that are stranded in the Keys, because at the time there was no highway like we have today, and you can't just drive out of the Keys like you would today if a hurricane were to come. There would be evacuations ahead of time. Forecasting back then wasn't also as great as it is today. So they probably had very little notice, and this train car just had to go full speed all the way to the Keys and rescue as many people as possible and bring them back to the mainland to safety. So you can just imagine what this train car went through, or what it saw from aboard. Crazy. Let's go check out this Atlantic Coastline Seaboard train. It is open, it is a passenger train. So let's see what this looks like in here. It's telling us to push to open. Whew. It is air conditioned in here, I love that. We got different tables here. Obviously, luggage would go up here. You can see the numbering for the seats. This is nice, a lot nicer than the other ones we've seen. Got nice carpeting on the side walls and on the floor. This looks like where, this is cool. This looks like where you would buy refreshments and food, similar to what Amtrak has nowadays. So you would buy here. These would be presumably the dining area. So just put yourself through this time period some time ago where you can just order your food here. You can do it today, but I just want to put myself in a different time. And someone here would serve you up, and you would pay and have a seat here. So this train car I'm in has a lot of history, especially during the Jim Crow era, where black people were segregated from white people. We saw it all throughout history, but it even existed on train cars. So for travel, for example, right now I am stepping into what is labeled here as the colored section. And this is where they would sit, segregated entirely. Not by much. I'm assuming there would be a door here, but this would be the section for white people. There are additional seats in here. I'm not entirely sure who this would be for. Maybe an attendant? Who knows? But it is completely sectioned off from the general seating by this door right here. It's pretty cool that they let you get onto a couple of trains. Not every train is open, but the ones that are have some significance. So it's really cool to just go inside, especially this what we just were inside of, where they were segregated at the time. Very awful history, but I am glad that it is here so people can get educated on how things were back then, even with the rail system. And of course, we did take a tour inside the Ferdinand Magellan armored presidential car. That, if you do come to this museum for that, it is an additional $10. It is a private tour. You cannot go in there just by paying. You have to go in with a guide who will unlock the door and bring you inside. It is a really great tour, by the way. You will learn everything about the train car, about what this president did to make it unique to them, what FDR did to make it more accommodating for his needs. He was in a wheelchair. As you guys saw, the custom wheelchair for him to kind of scoot his way through the car, and the handrails on the side as well. So it's very cool. Take the tour if you are here. I learned a lot before I even made it inside. They explained everything on the exterior, which I mentioned to you guys because I didn't film it, so I kind of reiterated what they told me. And then the tour inside was just fantastic. By the way, if you guys come here, we're not going to do this today, but for an additional fee, you can go right on that locomotive. It's about a 9-minute ride around the property. So that's an option if you wanna, if you come with the little ones or even just yourself. I mean, I wanna do it, but I don't have the time to. They are about to close at 4 p.m. You can book a train ride. It is a very heavy, couple thousand pound train that goes along these tracks all the way to the end. Again, 9-minute ride at probably at a slow pace, but you'll get to see more trains towards the back of the yard. So that's gonna do it for this video. I'm standing outside of the presidential car, the Ferdinand Magellan US #1, as it is referred to. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This was such a great experience for me. I got to learn a lot at the Gold Coast Railroad Museum. Come visit them if you want to. I found tickets on Groupon for like 14 bucks for 2 people. So that's $7 per person. I don't think that's bad at all. And then of course, if you're gonna pay that, pay the $10 extra to get a private tour inside of this very historic train that is still technically active. If any president wants to call it up, they will be given this train to go around the United States wherever they need to go. So a very historic train, not just this one, a lot of historic trains in this entire yard that is not just in here, but also outside. You get to see different cars along with the model trains. All the information to this museum will be down in the description if you want to check them out, their website. And with that said, I'm going to sign off from this video. It is very hot outside. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button. It helps support this channel and get this video out to other people. And subscribe and hit the bell button so you won't miss a future video. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one.